Part two. So, you're talking about Aleph Mem Tav being truth. Aleph Mem is the word for mother. Mem Tav is the word for dead. So you could say, well, my journey from Aleph to Tav through the memming, if memming is like water with waves, with currents, you could say Adam's existence, humanity's existence is to be born of a mother and then die. Aleph Mem, Mem Tav. And for Yahusha to come down here and have the human experience, he's going to do the same thing, be born of a mother and die. That's Adam's gauntlet and all the stuff in between, the Mem. Kuf Shin Tet is also the word for truth. Kuf Shin Tav is the word for bow, like a bow and arrow or like a rainbow. Kuf Shin Tet can be bow, but it's also to cause something to be straight, to fly straight. So you put fletchings on arrows, the little feathery things at the tail end of the arrow, and that causes the arrow to fly straight, given that the shaft, the stick of the arrow and the arrowhead is balanced and uniform and straight, it'll fly straight. So the idea that if you look at Kuf Shin Tet, that's the word for truth. The word Kuf Shin Tet also means an adornment, like the fletchings, the arrow, the feathers on the arrow. And to say that, well, has Elohim provided some mechanism for Adam to know whether he's on the right path, whether he's got it right? And you can say, yeah, it's his word. Yahweh says it. That's the truth. Do it. Simple. But right there in the garden, Yahweh allowed or caused or built it so that the Nachash, the serpent, would come in there and try to deceive Adam. Why would he do that? Right there, the end of Moshe's life, virtually the last sentence out of his mouth, he said, "Who is like you, Israel? With such an Elohim, with such a promise, such a covenant, nobody else on the face of the earth has anything like this. But your enemies will try to deceive you." How do you deceive Israel? Contradict what Yahweh said. How did the serpent deceive Adam? Contradict what Yahweh said. Deuteronomy 13. Well, hey, what if there's a prophet or a dreamer of dreams and they say something and it comes true? Oh, that's proof that it's a sign and a wonder that it's from heaven. No, if they try to lead you astray to something else, that's the proof that it's a deception. He uses this concept, Yashar Derek, straight path. And Derek is not just path, but it's how to bend the bow. It's the mode, the manner, the way, the conduct of how to walk, halakha. Derek is Dalet Resh Kaf, halakha is Hey Lamed Kaf. So how to walk the path straight. And the word Yashar, as in Israel, Yod Shin Resh Aleph Lamed, Yashar also means smooth, straight, right, level, plain. It's just like a highway. Highways and byways. The byways are roads that go around the rock, up the hill, down the valley, around this, find the way to cross the stream. But a highway, knock everything down and just straight through. Fill up the valleys, knock down the mountains, make it straight, you can go fast. Yashar is basically like the highway. So if he's going to say Adam's job on the face of the earth is, to tend the earth, that just keeps him busy. But Adam's job seems to be find the truth and then do it. Yeah, but if we're deceived all the time, we're deceived by the serpent, we're deceived by the false prophets and dreamers, we're deceived by the guys in their fancy robes and funny hats up in the pulpit and on the stage. I just saw this thing in something popped up on the internet, and there's a certain man, I don't remember his name, but it's like this guy is the head warlock of Hollywood, and he's written probably hundreds of pop songs. And he gets a download from the devil telling people how to sing them, and then he gives them the different Hollywood stars, and they sing it and make millions of dollars. And the person putting up the website was saying, you like to listen to these songs, but do you have any idea where they come from? It's like, yeah, somebody just wrote this song and they're singing it. It's like, there's more to it than that. Well, is that true? Well, so what? It's just a little song I'm singing, and it's like, why is the devil really doing that? Is he really working through this guy who thinks he's into some sort of sorcery and witchcraft? Why? To mess with your head, to compromise your thinking, to cloud your objectivity so that you either don't want to listen to the voice of Yahweh or you can't listen to the voice of Yahweh. So I was talking to somebody earlier in the week, and they had somebody who was I'm just going to say a good Christian, who was screaming at them saying, are you telling me that God can't hear me if I don't use his name, that if I use the name of God and Jesus, that my prayers don't work? Really of what sounded like a vile outburst of some sort of demonic projection. And it's like, see, I'm not trying to say who's going to burn in hell. I'm trying to say, Yahweh said, if we want to be his people, we got to listen to his words and do what he said. So I can't participate in those things because it's a conflict with what I've chosen to do. If I've chosen to be a man who listens to the voice of Yahweh and does it, if somebody else wants to use a different name and believe a different doctrine and believe in Saint Constantine or other angels and demons or whatever, that's up to them. I'm not telling them they're wrong. I'm saying I've chosen not to do that, and I would find myself wrong if I did. So I'm not going to. But you do whatever you want. You might want to double check to see if you're right, because Yeshua said, if he doesn't know you, you're going to be rejected and find yourself outside the place you want to be with no access in. Really serious stuff. So for me, I can sit here and say, if Yahusha said, I am truth, and Yahweh says, don't change, don't modify, don't add to or take away from my word, because my word is truth. Everything I say is going to be true. And if he said he made the seventh day Sabbath, Kadosh, for the church to change it is polluted, vile, desecrated. It's not holy. And if they claim to be the bride of Christ and they've changed anything, much less everything he said, if he says, walk in my ways, halakha the yashar derek, and they said, no, you don't have to do anything, he said, just believe. Well, that sounds nice. It might even sound good to you, but that's not what he said. So therefore, it's a lie. Therefore, it's the voice of the serpent. Therefore, it's satanic. So how could the holy sacred bride of Christ be constantly spewing forth utterances of false, profane, vile desecration, contradicting what Yahweh said? And so then the worst part of that, and I've said this before, I'm just trying to make it clear, is that all the people for 2,000 years now who really wanted to be Yahweh's people, they want the truth. They want to do what's right. They want life. Where do you go to find out? You go to church, because the church is the bastion of truth and life and goodness, righteousness. So you go to the church. That's the way it's robed. Its pretense is correctness. Only as soon as they start telling you, don't obey his voice, don't do what he said, don't keep the seventh day kadosh, sacred, holy, by not working on it. Don't worry about that. That's the voice of the serpent. Did Elohim really say? Well, yes, he did. Nah, well, that's the voice of the serpent in the garden. It's the same voice. So then you have to, for yourself, say, well, how do I know if there's any voice which is not polluted? So this whole thing about the mishkan pattern, you look at the 7 days of creation. There was no man. There was no other voices. There was no other thoughts. Elohim created in a series of 7 events. He created the heavens and the earth. Now, people believe Moshe wrote the book of Genesis, but how did Moshe know that? Did Elohim tell him, write these words? Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim va'et haaretz. Okay, Moshe's writing it down. Maybe he got that up on Mount Sinai or somewhere, or maybe that was handed down. I mean, how did Moshe write the book of Genesis? Word for word, letter for letter, concept by concept? Was he just telling a story in his mind? He was writing it down. Did the Ruach, the Holy Spirit upon him, lead him to write? No, nobody knows. There's a lot too. I mentioned before Stan Tenen with Meru, MERU, meru.org, I believe is what his site is. He's not around anymore, but the point is he spent 30 years looking at Genesis 1:1, did this thing called the dance of the Hebrew letters. He was looking at hand gestures and all this consciousness, just wrapped up in the 27 letters of that verse. And I know some people don't appreciate him, and he looked at the Zohar, a bunch of other stuff. I'm not trying to promote him, but what I'm trying to say is, look at all that amazing stuff that was just in the first verse. Did Moshe do that on his own? Was he the genius behind that writing? Or is Moshe told what was to be written? Either way, did Moshe invent? I'm just going to tell the story. Elohim created the world in 7 days, and this is what he did. Or did everybody know that? Was it handed down from Adam through Noah? Stories passed along on the ark, and then handed down through Abraham. And did Moshe pick it up just because everybody knew that? I don't know. But if I say, look at the 7 days of creation, which happened before there was anybody or anything else, it was an expression from Elohim. Elohim, the creator, determined for some reason to do it in 7 phases, and then tell us what they were, and said, this is what was made. Okay. Well, those are just facts. Is it true? Well, let's suggest it's true. But is it the truth? Is it truth? Truth itself, if truth is this Aleph Tav, and if Aleph Tav is this word through which the will of Elohim projected and made the heavens and the earth, then the manifest of the heavens and the earth in physical cosmology isn't truth. It's right. It's good. It's tov, he said, which means, hey, this works. This came out just the way I had planned. But truth is that thing which builds it to end up looking this way. When Adam and Hua ate of the fruit, it brought in distortion, perversion, corruption, which wasn't there before. But that's when they ate of the forbidden fruit. So to change or to deny or to not go along with something Elohim said, Adam was empowered with the ability to affect the entire universe, or at least the face of the earth, with a disintegration. But you see, when we read in Deuteronomy 30, when all these things come upon you, the blessing and the curse that I command you today, then you will return to these words with all your heart and all your soul, and Yahweh will restore his favor. So not only did Yahuwah build Adam in the capacity of ruining this place, he built Israel in the capacity to restore this place by just listening to his words. And that's truth. The truth is we can correct what has gone wrong by doing what he said. That's a true statement. That's a true concept, because the truth itself, you might say, like this certain tone, this note, when Adam synchronizes with it, with heart and soul, there's a harmony, there's a harmonic resonance. Harmony takes two that fit together. And Adam was built by Elohim to be, you might say, more refined as Israel, to be the one vessel, vehicle, the one tool in the universe to bring the correction. But see, if then Adam is told, oh, don't do what he said, just believe in Jesus, just have faith, don't do what he said, that's to take all the people that wanted to be that person and lead them astray and dump them into a gutter off the main path where they can't have any effect. If Yahuwah says to his people Israel, with all your heart and all your soul, desire and seek my will, my words, my truth, the truth is such that when you do, everything corrects back into where it's supposed to be. It's kind of like that cymatic pattern with sand on a tin or water ripples. Certain frequencies, the water is just random and all of a sudden forms a perfect geometric shape. Cymatics, C-Y-M-A-T-I-C-S. There's a lot of different studies going on with that these days. It's kind of like when the heart of Adam, to be Israel, to Shema Shomer Asha, what Yahuwah said for us to do, and we do it, we be it, that's the, you might say, the perfect tone where all the rest of the universe can come into alignment. Is that true? I can understand that concept, but then how do I find it? How do I find what we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to do? Well, he rested on the seventh day in the Genesis 1 and said that day was kadosh, set apart, holy, sacred, unlike the other 6. And so when I hear somebody's voice that says any day can be the Sabbath, well, that's not true. That's not what he said. Every day is the Sabbath. That's not true either. He made the Shabbat, the seventh day, kadosh. He made it that. Now there's the question of, well, should there be a lunar Sabbath or is it the Saturday? That's a whole nother question which I can't answer, but at least I know that it's not any day, every day, or Sunday. It's the seventh day Sabbath. Every other concept is changing it. So then when he gives us this mishkan, did Moshe invent the mishkan? Now, Moshe says, writing there in Exodus 25, he goes up to Mount Sinai, and here Yahweh somehow shows Moshe this mishkan in heaven and says, hey, Moshe, you make the one on earth just like the same exact pattern as you see the one in heaven. Don't change anything. Now, again, was Moshe lying? Did Moshe dream this up and figure this out? And did Moshe have the wherewithal to say, hey, I'm going to make this mishkan pattern like some sort of holy temple, but the whole thing is completely corrupt? Because Moshe was just a monster who was trying to be a tyrant, a despot, a dictator over these people of Israel. Well, you read the story of Moshe, he was the most humble of all men, it's like, it's not something he would have done according to how it goes. But the point is, if Yahuwah really did show him this pattern of the Mishkan in the heavens up on Mount Sinai and said, make sure you make it exactly like it. And then he commissioned a fellow by the name of Bezalel and his right-hand man Aholiab to make the articles of the temple. It wasn't a temple. It was called the Mishkan Tabernacle. Temple was more of a permanent structure. The tabernacle was one that they could break down and move it and set it back up and break it down and move it. But it's essentially served as we would think of as a temple, a place of ritual worship for some deity, religious. So why would Yahweh design that? So to see that the pieces of the Mishkan correlated to the 7 days is an astounding thing. But then on Leviticus 23, for Elohim to tell Moshe, these are my moedi, we might say moedim, Mikra Kodesh, appointed times. And for it to be the same pattern, it's like, okay, this is purely his design. And for the same exact calibration of the events of the 7 days, the 7 pieces of the Mishkan, the 7 moedim, it's kind of like his signature, his autograph, Yahweh's own personal autograph. And that means it's not just a random set, it's a very specific code. He's doing it on purpose. And then to find it, okay, it's also in the Beatitudes, it's also in the Lord's Prayer and hundreds of other places. And then to find it in the alphabet. Did Moshe invent the Hebrew alphabet? It's said the Phoenicians in Byblos invented the Hebrew alphabet. Moshe wrote all the words of Elohim. Moshe was approximately 1600 BC. They tell us, the historians tell us, that the Phoenicians invented the Hebrew alphabet somewhere around 1000 BC. 600 years later. Can't be. If Moshe wrote all the words of Elohim, and because the letters of the Hebrew alphabet are between the Aleph and Tav, which are the signature, the autograph, the word, the truth, somehow they're given to human consciousness to be Elohim. Though I'm not saying the Hebrew alphabet's God. I'm not saying it is Elohim. I'm saying for it to say in the beginning was this word and it was with Elohim and it was Elohim, then what that means, that there's also something in Greek about looking at that, that's a different matter, but it's a matter of saying it's not what we think it is in English, but it's a matter of saying when I look at the Hebrew alphabet, there is the place that Elohim can be located. What does that mean? He determined these 22 letters to be all-inclusive. There's not 26, 27 letters. There's 22. And I'm not trying to profane the 5 Sophite letters or the English or the Greek, but I'm just saying there's something about these 22. Some people think there's 23. Letter Gaian added, whatever. But the point is, what I'm saying is that you can believe whatever you want, but there's something about these 22. The menorah had 6 branches with 3 cups on each. That's 18, and 4 in the middle. That's 22. It's 22. 22 divided by 7, 3.14, that's pi. There's maybe something locking in there. But what I'm saying is the idea that I could sit here and say, would he invent a pattern like a signature? I don't know. Would he, could he, should he? Why not? Well, if he did, and if this Mishkan pattern is his signature, proving that it's him, then for us to see this pattern and to realize it's him, his signature, his autograph, is literally to have truth stare at you and gotcha. And when you see that and you realize, what does this mean? That means the living Elohim invented and gave to his people and told them to do it forever throughout all their generations, Pesach, Chag HaMatzot, count 50 days of Shavuot. And if somebody changes that and says, Jesus is my Passover, I don't need to do that, well, that's wrong. Oh, he poured out the Holy Spirit on the 50th day of Pentecost, so we don't have to do any of that stuff anymore. We just go, woohoo, we got the Holy Spirit. That's wrong. Yeah, well, I know he said this, but he changed it. That's what the serpent said in the garden. That's wrong. So if I can look at the Hebrew letters and say, well, there's Aleph through Zion is 7 letters, and I can correlate Aleph through Zion to the 7 days, the Mishkan pattern. And then between Chet and Zadi, there's 11 letters, but I can break those up into the 7 and correlate those to the Moedim and find that even though the letters basically are one picture and mean one thing, they can mean a bunch of things. Like an ayin drawn as a circle with a dot in it, whether it's a perfect circle with a dot or an elliptical with a tail. Well, that if it's elliptical with a tail, like the corner of the eye, that's almost like the stem with a fruit and a seed. Well, is that an eyeball or is it a fruit with a seed? Are those two different things or are they the same thing? You can think about it and wrap your mind out of it and find them to be the same thing of a sort. I can anyway. My point is the idea is to say, if he invented the Hebrew alphabet, if Yahuwah invented the Hebrew alphabet, then it wasn't Moshe. But he could have given it to Moshe if there was no orthography. If nobody wrote the Hebrew letters before Moshe, 1600 BC. The oldest artifacts on record that anybody's found with the Hebrew alphabet is 1200 BC. Well, how could they find records of 1200 BC if the Phoenicians invented it in 1000 BC? Well, they modify what they believe. Yeah, well, there was a 400 or 500 year discrepancy in the calculating the ancient days based on the dynasties of Egypt. Emanuel Velikovsky wrote about that, and there was another guy that wrote a book referring to that same thing, but a couple guys actually. But what I'm saying is that doesn't almost even matter. If Noah had a scroll with written Hebrew that he got from, let's say, Methuselah or Enoch or somebody before the flood, okay, well, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't know. Did Melchizedek have one that he gave to Abraham? I don't know. Did Abraham have written orthographic Hebrew that he gave to Isaac, who gave it to Jacob, who gave it to Joseph, who gave it to the 12 sons, who gave it to their kids, who gave it to Moshe? Maybe, I don't know. There isn't any record. The interesting thing about the word the bush, hey, Samik Nun, hey, Hasna, is that Samik is the letter that looks like a tree, like the menorah, which is an engineered structure, a trellis, skeleton. And Nun is the lightning bolt, the snake, the fish, jumping, vitality, pow, woo, like meaning. So if orthography is like a pile of sticks, like a skeleton, and the meaning they have, the life that's in the letter is the Nun, then I could look at, hey, Samik Nun, hey, the bush that happened to be on fire in Exodus 3, though it wasn't consumed, as literally telling Moshe, this is how you invent the orthography of the Hebrew, the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet. There it is. And Moshe could have been made aware, and if it didn't exist before him, Abraham, or Noah, or Enoch, or Methuselah, or anybody else, Moshe could have come up with it, or he could have refined it, or it could have been imparted to him just at that bush, because I can see that in those words. I can see it in that word of those letters, hey, Samik Nun, hey. Anyway, what I'm saying is that when you realize every letter says something about the identity and the intention of Yahuwah, the word Ehyeh, Aleph Hey Yod Hey, is translated to mean I am or I will. I am that I am, I will be what I will be. Is it the same thing in Hebrew and English? It's two different phrases. Well, whatever. It's existing. Asher is like existing, so that's like a dot geometrically. Asher is a straight line, and then there's another dot. So the motif, the graphic motif of a dot, a line, and a dot is I am that I am, I will be what I will be. What this is Yashar Derek with what that is. Is that a picture of Yahuwah and Adam, Yahuwah and Israel, Yahuwah and Yeshua? Wrap your mind around that. But there's something about his identity which is there. So if I can sit here and say, if he inspired Moshe to write the Torah, he inspired Moshe to, let's say, refine or to use the Hebrew letters, and that every Hebrew letter, if the Aleph as a concept speaks about the author, the first person, I am, I will, if that's Alephness, the archer who makes the arrow, puts the fletchings, and makes sure it goes straight and builds a bow with a certain tension on the string so that he can pull back and accomplish the task of hitting a certain target. The archer himself does that. The artist, the agent, the administrator, the ambassador, these words starting with A in English are these people that take on with this proactive causal effect. Well, if that's the Aleph, if that's the Alephness, then it sets up that the rest of the other 21 letters are the communication of the Aleph. Well, who wrote the alphabet? So I can look at the entire alphabet as a communication. I who? Who's talking? Well, if the one who's talking is the I am, then when he says I will or I am, and then he lays out 21 more letters, then I can look at the 21 letter alphabet as not just a word, but as a message, as a communique. It's like, yeah, but there's 22 funny shapes. How does anybody know what really the 22 random squiggle shapes are? Well, the Paleo-Hebrew happens to make the 22 random squiggle shapes actually very specifically correlated to an object. So the Aleph is like an ox head. Bet is like the floor plan of a tent. Gimel is the head and neck, or the leg and the foot of a camel in somebody's imagination. And it just is historically, that's what they are. But when you get to the letter Het, the 8th letter, that's a fence. Well, there happened to be a fence around the Mishkan. And then also in the Mishkan, there was a barbecue grill. Now that's like the letter Kaf, like the open hand with the lines, and you put the object sacrifice and the drippings go through into the coals. Mem is water. Then there was a laver, that's Mem Nun. Menorah, table of showbread, altar of incense, samach, ayin, pei. It's like the pattern fits the letters. And if he invented this alphabet and he said, this is my communication, then for him to give us the 7 days and the 7 Moedim and the pieces of the Mishkan, and then for Yeshua to come down and say, let me tell you how this works. And he gives the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, and part that's in Matthew 5 and then Matthew 6, the Lord's Prayer, and still the same pattern. And if we could sit there and say, wait a minute, look at what's happening on this pattern. Well, then what's the signature actually saying? It's identifying him, but the pieces of the 7 elements are this. I'm the creator of heaven and earth. Who's talking? Yahuwah. Yahuwah's a vote. There happen to be 4 colors of embroidery on the door. So blue, purple, red, white. Blue, purple, red, white linen, gold thread, but is that 5? But the point is blue, purple, red, white. It gives us that more than 20 times in Leviticus. It talks about always the same color pattern. So there's something about the color pattern. It's a code. If the fence surrounding the Mishkan, the place of meeting together, well, the place of meeting together is in our mind, we could say that. In our listen to his words, contemplate his words, that's where we meet in the heart, in the mind. So if I break down then, if I correlate Kaf and Lamed to the barbecue grill lining up with unleavened bread, Chag Hamatzot, what'd they do? They got rid of all the leavened bread and they had unleavened bread for a week. That's like day 2, separating the waters in the heavens from the waters on the earth and putting a firmament, a rakia, in between. That's like coming into his kingdom and leaving the stuff of the kingdom of the world, of darkness and death behind, and stepping into a whole new consciousness. So I can contemplate what that means with my own mind, and I can look at different Bible verses and say, well, that looks like it plays into that concept. The Torah is lines, like the grate this way on the floor. If I turn it this way, that looks like lines of instruction. A shepherd's staff is teach and learn, repeat. Authority, teach and learn the Torah. Okay, that's Kaf Lamed lining up with the barbecue grill, lining up with Chag HaMatzot. So if somebody says we don't have to do the festival of unleavened bread anymore because Jesus Christ is the bread of life, and it's like, well, okay, you can believe he's the bread of life. Maybe he is the bread of life. What does that mean? Well, okay, run with that idea, but that doesn't negate that Yahuwah told Israel to keep the celebration of Chag HaMatzot for a week in the spring, the month of Aviv, every year throughout all your generations. And if the Christian church says, it's got nothing to do with us, it's like, thank you for making that clear. It's got nothing to do with you. Okay. So if Yeshua says, that's me, I am these Moedim in human form, the word made flesh. And the foundation, the structure of the word is with these letters and with these Moedim. Why don't they recognize that that's him? And if they don't recognize that that's him, and so they change his imagery, no wonder the Jews can't go along with it, nor those with the Islamic or Muslim perspective. I don't know their perspective, but it would be just as wrong for them to acknowledge the veracity, the truth of the Christian position if the Christian position is wrong. If they do not hold to what Yahweh said, then no Buddhist or Muslim should listen to the Christian voice, even if they're talking about salvation. Why? Because salvation doesn't belong to Jesus Christ. This group in Revelation 7 says salvation belongs to our Elohim and to the Lamb. What? He who sits under the throne and to the Lamb? Yeah, that's Jesus Christ. No, not necessarily. If Jesus Christ, the name, the word, the imagery, the icon, the paradigm represents change his day, change his name, change his Torah, change his covenant, change the designated people group, if that's Jesus Christ, then that Jesus Christ is a devil. It's not Yahusha. No matter what you call him, no matter what you think you were told. If you were told by your pope, bishop, prophet, pastor, priest, professor, if you were told by any one of those people something different, you got to fall back into Deuteronomy 13 and say, this is a trick. So why was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil put in the garden? To trick Adam and Hua? Why would Yahweh do that? You got to go back to say, what's the point of us walking the face of the earth? So we're culturally told, so you're a little child, you learn how to walk and talk, brush your teeth, play some sports, go to school. Okay. You grow up, you get a job, learn how to drive, have a family, buy a house, put some money in the bank, retire, get old, and then you die? Really? What's that about? Oh, we're just life on earth. Really? That's what it's for. No, that's the staging. But like I was saying before, if it's 4, okay, now you get to choose who you are. So if you want to be a person of virtue, what does that mean? That means you're going to be put to the challenge, because that's where virtues are played out. If you look at courage and honesty, patience, long suffering, all those things that look like they're fruits of the Spirit, I'll just turn my will off and let the Holy Spirit live through me. That sounds kind of holy and religious, but I don't know that that's the way it works. The way it works is you got to choose to be his person and do his virtues. And yeah, his Ruach HaKodesh, his Holy Spirit, might empower you and give you, but you have to do it. Just fall back and Jesus, take the wheel and let your faith carry you. I don't think it works that way. I know a guy who was driving at the in a race car, 280 miles an hour, whatever it was, Portland International Raceway here. He had to keep his hands on the wheel, man. If he all of a sudden got into a jam and took his hands off, Jesus, take the wheel. Whoa, gosh. You know, there's this, that's a beautiful song, it's a poetry, but where's the reality? This life is difficult. We gotta be doing it on purpose. So the philosophy or the religious view that says, just relax, don't be anxious for anything. Like I talked about that word last week, don't be anxious, which means don't care. Well, I won't bother to look at it. You see, even the word in English, be anxious for nothing, because or don't care about things because he cares for you. He'll do the caring for you. He told us to shema and shomer. The word shomer is also the word to beware. It's also the word for like a warning sign. Over in Israel, I was there a long time ago, and there was a barbed wire fence. It was all kind of broken down. You could have easily stepped over it, and there was a sign there, kind of half rusty, but it said, warning, don't cross this barbed wire fence or else there's the minefield out here. It was up near Syria, the Golan Heights. It's like a minefield. If you cross this line, you will run the risk of tripping a landmine and blowing up your arms and legs, and just don't do it. That's Yahuwah's Torah. In Corinthians, it says something about the trying to think of the exact word, the ministry of death in letters. Ministry of death in letters. You read that in English and it's enough to make you think that this business of looking at the letters and worrying about or caring about how things are spelled and what every little thing means is wrong. We shouldn't do it. That Paul was encouraging the Corinthians and us to just leave all this stupid nonsense alone. I believe the word diakonos was the Greek word, or the word deacon for a ministry. But if you read closer to what that says, it says there's a certain ministry of death. Ministry, there, that's like that letter lamed, belonging to or talking about death. What's a deacon supposed to do? Well, in a church, a deacon's the guy who greets you when you come in the door, and maybe he'll guide you to a seat that's available, or maybe they pass a collection plate and hand out a bulletin. Care for people, kind of like a hostess in a restaurant, waiter maybe. The elders are different. Pastor's a different job, but that's deacon, diakonos. Ministering death. Well, see, Yahweh used the Torah to tell us where death was. You could say when he told Adam, don't eat that tree, the fruit of that tree, that was Torah. If you eat that tree, you're going to die. And the serpent said, you're not going to die. Right there. Here's the ministry of death using words, using letters. If you eat this, you will die. And the serpent says, no, you won't. Different words, different meaning. So if Yahweh says, keep the Sabbath day kadosh, because I'm kadosh, my day's kadosh, and if you're my people, you're supposed to be kadosh. Don't eat this food, that's kadosh. You're my betrothed, that's kadosh. You're my sacred, set apart people, that's kadosh. And then somebody says, Jesus said we can eat whatever we want. Jesus said we can work or not work any day we want. Jesus is our Passover. Jesus is our Sabbath day. All that's wrong. But we have to stop and go, wait a minute, what? Let me pay attention to what's going on. Those are different words. That's wrong. And it's the same trick every time. Yahweh says something, they say something different. Well, then what's the ministry of death in letters? What Paul actually said, if you read closer, he says, if we regard the ministry of death in letters with, okay, whoa, be careful. You better believe it. We're being careful. You don't want to cross. Thank you for the sign written in letters. Don't step over this barbed wire fence or I'll get blown up. Thank you for that. Even more should we be happy about the ministry of life, telling us where life is. Well, that's also in letters. But it's also in Yahusha. But he gave us words. He gave us letters. So when he says, keep the Sabbath day and keep the words of this Torah, whoever does so will live in them, by them. That's life in the ministry of letters. The ministry of death is in letters, but the ministry of life is also in letters. But then if somebody says, no, Paul was saying you don't have to regard the words, we have the spirit instead of words. Well, that's not true. That's a misrepresenting. That's a disorientation. Because Yahweh has always been about the word. He's always been about what he said. He said on Mount Sinai, you heard a voice, you saw no image. Not a male or a female or a lizard or a bird or a fish or an animal. You heard only words, a voice, words which can be written. So when Moshe was told to write all the words of Yahweh, he had to use Paleo-Hebrew. He couldn't have written Yahweh's words in Egyptian or cuneiform. And there was no other written language. He had to use Paleo-Hebrew. All the words of Yahweh can be written, have to be written in Paleo-Hebrew. After the Tower of Babel, things spun out and we got Greek and Latin and English and Chinese and everything else after the Tower of Babel. There's something so primally pristine about this Paleo-Hebrew because of this mishkan pattern being his signature. To see that, to understand that, is to know that I'm looking at truth. I'm not just looking at something that is true. The Torah is true, and it was in the after show last week that part of the conversation was the Torah written as words is just words. Oh yes, but it's sacred. It's holy. It's the sacred book of writing, and it's like it's just words of instruction. When Adam, as Israel, does those words, there's an empowerment where the suggestion of the words are activated. So you think about that, for all these years, for all these centuries, since David 3,000 years ago, I think David got it. Read Psalm 119. He says, oh man, this stuff is so incredible, but he never tells us what this stuff is. He just says your Torah is truth, and he doesn't tell you why. He doesn't tell you how. There's more to that study of Psalm 119. We could maybe do that again one of these days. But what I'm saying is that the idea that the Torah is so sacred, so holy, so kadosh, that, oh, there's the words written on paper. They're static. They're just words sitting there on paper until the Adam's mind realizes, pulls it into his heart with affection, becomes it and does it in action. And because the letters are keyed to the Moedim, Ket Tet Yod with Pesach, Kaf Lamed with unleavened bread, Mem Nun with Shavuot, Samik Yom Teruah, Ayin Yom Kippur, Pei Sukkot, Zadi Shemini Atzeret, and then these last collection of 4, Kuf Resh Shin Tav. And like I said, you can correlate the first 7 with the next 11 and overlap those two together and see a double check way of doing that. But the point is about that is that by keeping the Moedim, we're actually doing it. It's like, how do you do the alphabet? How do you do the Torah? It's like dancing. You're not just listening to the music, but you're up and moving and undulating, wiggling, engaged in some sort of, it takes on a different dimension. Somehow to keep the Moedim is bringing it into another dimension. And for Israel, his people, those are the ones that instructed. No other nation, just Israel. So if you keep the Moedim, it's a way of becoming Israel. But for Israel to keep the Moedim sends out, as it were, a cymatic resonance to correct the misaligned bad vibrations of every other atom, every other cell, every other electron in the entire universe. And if that correction then brings about Yahuwah being able to step into the occasion. You read Ezekiel 36, and he says, when you guys do what I said, when I made Kadosh in you, through you, by you, in the eyes and the comprehension of the Gentiles amongst whom you've been scattered, then I will play into or make my great name Kadosh. In other words, it looks to me, in other words, I'm translating this, if we keep him misrepresented, he's not going to step in. Once we, his people, start representing him, talking about him, saying who he is for real, in truth, as he actually is, the right name, the right day, the right Moedim, the right words, then he can synchronize with that and say, yeah, I'll fill that up with my presence. And his presence then comes with shock and awe, pillar of fire, pillar of smoke, destruction of our enemies, and you might say the harmonic bliss of being echad with him, nature cooperating, weather cooperating, health, sanity. And if that couples with the downfall of all the other isms and the downfall of all the other politics and military expressions, whether it's commercial or with armaments, like corporate military, to ruin food and to ruin the air and the water and ruin the economy and all that stuff. Those are military actions. But what I'm saying is that the agenda of all those that would do stuff like that is thwarted, because he said that he would undo those things. He said that he's going to scatter his people around the face of the earth, and then when he pulls his people back out from where they're scattered and brings them back to the land, he said he's going to demolish all the nations where he had them scattered. It's something we don't really hear about very much. I can forget where it's written, but that's what he said. In other words, the same way that while Joseph was working for Egypt, they were thriving, and then Egypt put all the, you might say, the countrymen of Joseph, the Israelites, into captivity, into slavery, and then they were oppressing them. The extraction method of the 10 plagues to pull Israel out brought Egypt to absolute devastation and ruin. And according to some, the Hyksos were actually the Amalekites who came in and just ruled over Egypt as warlords and just pillaged and pilfered the all that was left. And Egypt was just destroyed. The same way, if Yahuwah has us scattered amongst the nations, when he pulls us out to bring us back, he said he's going to completely tear down those nations where he had us destroyed, where he had us in exile. Well, that means the nations as we know them have to come to ruin. But it's not the end of the world. If he is going to bring us, his people, scattered across the face of the earth, back to the land, if that means not the rapture, but if that means bring us back to Israel, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the politics or the wars or the culture going over there in that land right now, because they don't talk about Yahuwah. They don't talk about mercy and kindness and truth. If Yahuwah is going to clean out the people that are there, just like cleaning out the Canaanites when the cup of their iniquity was full, I don't know what that looks like. I don't have to be able to understand who's his people and who's not his people. I just have to understand, am I his people? What did he say? What did he mean? And what should I do to think his way, to behave the way he said to behave? And if he said, when I bring you back, I'm going to demolish all the nations where you were held in captivity for all these years, waiting until you would come back, then if I choose to be the generation that comes back to him, I can look at Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel chapter 2 and say, he saw this statue, head of gold, arms of silver, midsection bronze, legs of iron, feet iron mixed with clay. Little rock comes out, hits the feet, disintegrates them. The statue falls over. It hits the ground. It pulverizes in the dust. The wind blows it away. Then the rock becomes a mountain that fills the whole earth. It will not yield its sovereignty to another. Where's the rapture? If Aleph Bet Nun is rock, stone, Aleph Bet is father, Aleph Bet is also desire, Bet Nun is son, Bet Nun Hey is to build, Bet Yod Nun is to understand the desire of the Father and then do it like a good son. So when he says, this is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased, listen to him when Yeshua is being baptized, that same picture, if that's a picture of Israel simply doing what he said and conflicting with the regal, the feet, the legs of the statue, well, the word regal, ref gimel lamed, is where we get the word relegate, regular, religious, regulation, regal, RGL, both these words, custom, habit, and tradition. Religious observance, custom, habit, and tradition. Feet, leg. Roman mixed with clay, potsherds, is that the voice of democracy? What I'm saying is that if in these days we change our allegiance to the custom, habit, and tradition and just do what he said, we're not fighting against militarily, economically, we're just changing the culture of the Sabbath day and the Moedim and his language. That's what he said. 5 minutes. So if I then say, why would the church promote a rapture theory if there was no rapture theory? It gets us distracted, so we're not going to do what Yahweh said. If what he said was, as soon as you come back to my words, I'll bring you back to the land and you'll walk in my ways. Ezekiel 36, I think it's 26, says, I'm going to put my Holy Spirit, I'll put my Ruach HaKodesh in you, and he'll make it, or you will, having that my spirit within you will make it so that you want to walk in my ways. You will walk in my ways. Well, then that's not the Christian church, because they don't want to walk in his ways. When it comes to these kind of things, they'll walk in his ways when it comes to, you might say, expressions of righteousness and goodness and faith. But if it's not the Elohim of the Pesach, the Matzot, the Shavuot, the Sabbath day, Is it a fake God? Is it an Elohim Achrim, a different God, God of others? Even though they have signs and wonders, even though they got a real nice Holy Spirit, even though they have beautiful worship songs, it's not about that. The significance of the Mishkan pattern, then, it's, well, if it's his signature, if it's his autograph, it's the proof. It's the proof that it's true, that it's the proof that it is the truth. And to see, to be, if you're just listening to words and you hear me talking about this stuff, blah, 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 you're looking. Somehow you need to have truth catch your eye back at you. And if you see truth in the Aleph Tav, in the Aleph Bet, looking at you, it's like catching somebody's eye. Do you think you'd recognize that? Would it startle you? It's kind of like the idea of if the truth were to look at you and wink at you. It's like, I know you know that I'm looking at you. I know that you know that I know that you know that. That we would have his words written on our heart because they're his words. And I've had people say, oh, he knows our hearts. Yeah, but do we know his heart? Yeah, I know his heart. I've got the Holy Spirit. Yeah, but if you know his heart because you have the Holy Spirit, why don't you want to walk in his ways? Why do you find his ways to be disturbing, loathsome, casual disregard, whatever? He warned us about all that. That was in Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28. Anyway, I've tried to go slower here a bit about this Mishkan pattern and dwell on it long enough to say, and this is, I'm just projecting this, that this group in Revelation 7, if they come from every language and tongue and nation, that doesn't mean they have the Bible in their language. What I was trying to say about this Mishkan pattern, giving it to the Nigerians, it's like, just show them the 7 pictures. That's all they need. It's like, what do you mean show them 7 stupid little pictures of the Mishkan? That's all they need. It would take some explanation. The big white fence, you're either in or out. Choose to be his people or not. Put before you life and death. Choose life. The thief on the cross. Remember me. Choose life. He doesn't know the doctrines. Choose life or choose death. At some level, it's just that simple. Now, once you're in, if you still have time, you still have some life, some breath in your lungs, learn the instructions. Learn the Torah. That's just a matter of pounding out this line, that line. What did he say? What's it mean? Learn the language. Oh, gosh. But it's one thing to learn intellectually, this is the stuff of the kingdom. The laver, taking it to heart, is an attitude about his stuff. To be impregnated with warm affection, resh chet mem, the word for womb. So you have the big white fence, then you've got the barbecue grill and the laver, that's outside, and then in the covered place you had the other 3 things. But why these 3 things outside? Choose life, learn the instructions, and have a warm inner heart of favor to be impregnated by this seed, his stuff. Then when somebody says, they lied to us about the Sabbath day, instead of saying, shut up, I don't care about that, it's like, what? Really? Could we be wrong? Oh, man, I got to get on the right track. I don't want to be hearing the words, I never knew you. Are you kidding me? What's this going to take? Oh, did you know that Christmas and Easter had been so polluted with corrupt heathen idolatry and pagan symbology that it's not even anything like the Moedim he gave us in Leviticus 23. Well, then let's make the correction. Let's get on board with what he said. How do you do that? Oh, let's just do what the Jews do. No, the Jews don't necessarily got it right either. Let's just read the words and figure it out. Ask him to lead us, guide us by his Ruach. Maybe the Jews got it right, but maybe they don't. We are still in a place to make a correction and make a difference because nobody's nuked the planet yet. And whether or not anybody's going to nuke the planet, or you read Revelation chapter 8, where the 7 trumpets, 8 and 9, there's some pretty rotten, nasty stuff going to happen. Do we have to be here for that? I don't know. But he said that if we're part of that group, salvation is owned by our Elohim. Our Elohim is the Elohim of salvation, and he's the guy that gave us the Moedim, the Sabbath day, this language. And it's all in there. So what I'm saying is that I'm choosing to see that that group of people knows this stuff. So this period of time when we're talking about this stuff and trying to publish this and make it on the internet is for anybody that wants to be part of that group of people in Revelation 7 to know the truth. This has nothing to do with Christianity. This has nothing to do with Judaism. This has to do with every single tongue and nation and people group, every culture should be able to look at these 7 pictures of the Mishkan and say, there's truth there. Choose Yahuwah. He has a very specific name. Learn his Torah, which is righteousness. Take it to heart. Now do what he said. It's not just theory. There's the menorah. Remember that the fruit of everything you do is going to come back on you. Measure for measure. There's the table of showbread. There's the ayin. There's Yom Kippur. Do what he said. Everything you do is going to come back around. Then what's the pay? What's the altar of incense? The 3 inside the covered place, Micah 6:8. Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your Elohim. So something about the pay, the mouth is walking humbly with your Elohim, relating to him, talking to him, trying to reconnoiter with him. Doing justly is the menorah. Do what he said. Do the right thing. Laura Schlesinger used to say, and her show would say, now go do the right thing. Great advice. Love mercy. With the measure you use, it's measured to you. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Whatever you do is going to come back on your own head. That's the ayin. That's the eyeball. That's the fruit with the seed within it. And the hope set before you, the Zadi, the resurrection. Whenever, however that happens, whether or not there's a rapture, whether or not there's flying up into the heavens, whatever. He told us, do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your Elohim. And how do you walk humbly with your Elohim? Not working on Shabbat and keeping the Moedim as we tend each other, as we help each other. That's about as simple as I see that this gets. And I can't see any other thing he said to do, like don't eat pork, don't eat the shellfish. It's like, why? It'll abominate you. Don't do sorcery and witchcraft. Don't get involved with sexual perversions. Why? It'll abominate you. Don't do it. Well, what's a perversion? That's a whole nother subject. The point is, do what he said. And that seems to be the biggest struggle. But if that simple thing can be told to every people group, what about the whole rest of the Bible? What about Jesus dying for your sins? Like the red heifer sacrifice outside the fence, because of that, you can choose life, be washed clean, find favor, now learn to keep his Torah. It doesn't absolve us from keeping his Torah. So it seems like the whole New Testament concept is not in contradiction, not in contrast to the Mishkan pattern idea, but the Mishkan pattern idea still is that the fundamental heart, Adam's job on the face of the earth, is to choose life, learn the instructions, and take it to your heart, not just a pretense of behavior. and then do what he said. That's about it. But if we did it, if Israel did it, it'll like the cymatic, it'll change the resonance of the entire universe, make a difference, and then he'll step in. Daniel 2, Ezekiel 36. And it doesn't matter if there's a rapture. It doesn't matter the shape of the earth. It doesn't matter about the demons and the aliens, because they're trying to lie to us about everything with all kinds of high-tech stuff beyond our imagination, some of their technology. Anyway, I believe we're at the end of time here. Is there anything that anybody else wanted to say regarding any of this stuff before we quit the recording? Or we could just go right to the after show.
I'll say a little something.
Okay.
So again, Eric, yes, in the mishkan pattern, in the Aleph Tav, in all of creation, that's what I was trying to say last week. It is really that simple. I think that humanity, we like to complicate it for ourselves. And I know that you may think that it's very repetitious, the way that you say it and what you're trying to show us, but I think that is a great way of showing, the picture that is in your head, because we all understand in different ways, right? We all understand in different, from I don't know, pictures or words or experience or whatever, but it really is all there. It's like you're always talking about. It is the fractal pattern of it all. When a scientist is looking for truth, they find Yah. When a mathematician is looking for truth, they find Yah. Whenever we look for truth, the concept of what is it, we always end on him, and the way that he communicates with us is through his words, his concepts, what he has blessed us with. So, I mean, for me to say anything is just to repeat everything that you've been saying. But I appreciate that you have so many different ways of exposing it, because it is just that. It is right in our faces. It's just like I was saying earlier. It's humanity, we are pilots staring at truth, Yahusha, in the face and asking, what is truth? It's right there. We just can't seem to grasp it,
Well, to know that there is a concept, truth, like I say, it seems difficult to even explain. But if there is this thing of truth, if we can explain it by saying, oh, well, that's what this Aleph Tav thing is, well, then how do you explain it? Well, by sticking a mem. Well, what's mem? Mem is water, but think of ripples. So all the ripples on the surface of the lake, as it were, between Aleph and Tav, those are all the other letters. So once you have this benefit of the language, it gives you substance to that which otherwise has no substance. So that's what I'm trying to express, is to say it's only aloof when you have nothing, but once you got this, where Yeshua says, I am the truth. Well, who are you? I'm the Word incarnate. What word? The Aleph Tav. What is that? That's truth. As a foundational structure, as a concept that Elohim created before he ever created the universe, based on truth. And that concept of truth will dog the head of any philosopher who tries to figure it out without this.
I got a verse here too, Eric. We say to do Torah. What do you mean by to do Torah? Well, Mashiach says something very similar about truth. In John 3:21, but he that doeth truth, cometh to the light, and his deeds may be made manifest, that they are worked in Yahuwah. Doing truth. Is that the truth that you're on about? Is that just truth? I think it's the truth. I think it's the real substance of what truth is, that we can do truth. It's been very familiar with this word, like we're getting very familiar with these words because we're building them by letter and seeing the, you know, creation of Yahuwah in these letters. But we need to be able to do truth.
So how does one, if somebody just looked at that verse and says, okay, that's a great sentence, woohoo, do truth. Wait a minute,
Yeah,
how do you
I just did.
How do you
go.
You have a t-shirt, do truth. And it's like, okay, yeah, well, yeah, what? How is that? How do you do truth?
I think your words have to be as creative as the Father's. It has to be manifest in this world through Him manifesting on your behalf because they're worked in Him. The manifestation is worked by Yahuwah if you're doing truth. He's behind your back. He's going to bring to pass what you're speaking in His name with acquaintance to the factual substance of His Aleph Tav. You know, the actual words you're speaking are a creative force. He is trusting Yisrael with these words to do truth. You know, His kingdom come. His kingdom is among us if we do the truth, then our works are wrought in Yahuwah. That means He does the works on our behalf in truth, doing truth. Maybe it's a big concept, but I think we need to find out how to do this.
Well, no, it's a great thing that you point this out. So again, I'm trying to wrap my mind around this idea of do truth. I could say do true things. No, that's not what it says.
No.
Do truth. I can say, well, the truth is pork will abominate you. So to do the truth is to don't eat pork. Well, okay. The truth is the Shabbat is kadosh, so do the Shabbat. Okay, I can do that.
Yep.
But is there more to it than what I'm saying that you were trying to suggest?
Yeah, I believe, you know, that we are the Ben of Elohim. We should be just like our Father and get to this place where we're not really dogging the Christians. We ain't dogging the Jews. We ain't dogging Islam. We aren't dogging Buddha, but we're actually being the Derek. We're actually being the Lahaim. We are actually being truth. Mashiach's ourselves.
So not just do truth, be truth.
Absolutely.
There's a difference between doing and being. They can overlap, but there is a difference.
That's true. But we have to get to the posture. As He is, so am I in this world, you know. So that's not even having this mind in you, which was also in the Mashiach, who thought it not robbery to be equal with Yahuwah. Get some of that in your head, you know, get some of that working in your head to be able to produce the acts of Elohim, that we can change this world with comprehension, not only in our head, but in our ruachs, that we are what He says we are. Praise Yah. That's what I've got to say.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to I'm trying to hear your words and turn them into a perspective of what does that look like if I was actually doing that.
Can you say something? Can she say something?
Yeah. Remember, we're still on recording. This is going up on YouTube, just so you know. We could stop and go to the after show if you want, but just so you know.
All right. It's only very quick, but in the Tanakh, there's often truth linked to chesed, kindness. In the attributes of mercy, chesed ve'emet, truth and kindness. Psalm 85 has got a really big lesson regarding truth. It says, chesed ve'emet nifgashu, kindness and truth have met. Zedek v'shalom nosaku, righteousness and shalom have kissed. And then it says something really quite interesting. It says, emeth me'eretz titzmach, truth from earth will sprout. And that word to sprout is samech, which is the word for one of the names of the Mashiach branch. And this is when we attain a level of messianic consciousness or messianic state of being, where we are ever growing and ever flourishing. So from this state, once we reach that state where we're ever growing and ever flourishing, and we're not going like in up and down, descending and rising, descending and ascending. We whatever happens, we're in a state of constant ascent, constant growth, constant flourishing, constantly evergreen. And this is associated with truth, because those initial letters of Emeth, Me'eretz, Titzmach, truth from the earth will sprout, also spell Emeth. So Emeth is Aleph, Me'eretz from the earth is Mem, and Titzmach is Tav. So even the initial letters spell out Emeth, you know, which is very interesting. And something.
Initial letters, you mean the initial letter of each word you just said?
Yeah, Emeth.
So the 4 words begin with E, that's right, Aleph, Mem. Yeah, that's what Stephanie's saying. I don't know if that you.
Did you understand what I was saying?
Yes, I did. But you're saying that was Psalms 83, was it?
Yeah, Psalm 83. And also Bereshith bara Elohim, the end letters, not in order, are Emeth. Bereshith bara Elohim. The very first 3 letters of Aleph Bet, of the Torah, Bereshith, Tav, bara, Aleph, Elohim, Mem. So they also rearranged to spell Emeth.
Mark, you were trying to say something?
Oh, I was listening in, but there's all kinds of things you mentioned today, and about the rapture. You know what I think about the rapture, but Messiah himself tells us that there's no such thing as the rapture, because what he says in John 17, verse 14, he's speaking to the Father, and he says, I have given them your word, Father, and the world has hated them because of it. They are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Then he says, I do not pray that you should take them out of the world. What's the rapture? You got to take them out of the world. Messiah says, I pray that you don't take them out of the world, but that you should keep them from all evil. That's one of the points that you made there, but people want to believe those kind of things. Like I say, it just came into being maybe 100, 200 years ago, that kind of bogus theology. And then in Matthew 5, for example, Messiah is giving us a message, but most people don't completely understand what it is, because he's not speaking to them that are not keeping the Torah. Okay? In Matthew 5:17, after he says, I'm not come to destroy the law, but to bring it to the full, to confirm it, because it's the word pleru, which means confirm. And then he says, for verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, and not one jot or tittle shall in any wise pass from the law until all is fulfilled. Well, as I look outside here, the end hasn't come yet. So it's not been all fulfilled. So not one jot or tittle is passed from the law. Then he says, again, he's not speaking to those who don't keep the Torah. He's saying, whosoever therefore shall break one of the least of these commandments and shall teach men to do so, he shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. And whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So he's not talking to those that don't know the Torah. He's saying, if you guys keep the Torah, but even if you break the smallest one, you're going to be least in the kingdom. When Messiah's coming back for a bride, is he coming back for a least bride or a great bride? That's, again, up to you to decide. Then he says, for I say unto you, that except your righteousness shall exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. So what's he telling us there? He's telling us that these guys over here, the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they're not keeping my Torah. They don't have my righteousness. They're not going to make it into the kingdom. Why? Because it's a man-made religion. If they continue to follow the man-made religions of the world, they're not going to make it into the kingdom. Our righteousness is supposed to exceed those of the man-made religions of the world. How do we do that? By keeping the Torah. It's, it's in black and white, or in my case, it's in red and white scriptures.
Okay, well, just so people know, we're still a recording. This is going on YouTube, so maybe we should go ahead and.
In case we say something we shouldn't.
You want to say something else there, Paul?
No, I was just saying goodbye to everybody.
Oh,
on YouTube.
Okay,
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's good to have on there, but just so we keep the format of what we're trying to do, just so you
I was
know.
gonna ask if Greg, would you like to close us in prayer?
Greg?
Greg?
Yes, he can't hear you.
You're
Are you talking to me? I got a vacuum cleaner going.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Paul, you want to close us out in prayer and we can continue on the after show?
Father, thank you for the inspiration that I learned from Eric years ago. How many doing how much for how long will it take to turn this world upside down? That's sort of paraphrased, but Father, I just thank you that every day we get closer to being who you want us to be. Enable us, help us, and empower us for this moment of time that we may be Ben Elohim. Amen.
Amen.